Welcome to Beyond the Silence, Beyond the Pain. Thank you for stopping by another time to our broadcast, wherever you're coming in from. Good morning, good night, good afternoon. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, I have with me my guest, Takara, Dr. Takara Nicole, and we so look forward to hearing what Dr. Takara has to say. Well, just to let it be known who I am, because I'm sure you're kind of wondering who I am. My name is Jacqueline Geddes. I am a survivor of domestic abuse. And for 29 years, I basically stayed in an abusive marriage until the day I was faced with that harsh reality that despite every effort, the cycle kept going on and on and on. And after the 29 years of abuse, I just made a decision to end it all. Right? I was exhausted and I had tried every single avenue of trying to salvage this marriage. It was such a long and hard battle, but eventually I managed to fight my way through. Thank God. And so I've written a book and I've also started this podcast to help others who are going through a similar situation. Today is the second of a three-part segment where I interview other survivors of domestic abuse. Last week, we had Shanine Gordine, and the topic was the reason for the battle. Today, I have Dr. Takara Steele with early signs, and next week, we will have Harriet Barron, before you say yes. And then on June the 2nd, we so look forward to all three of us, all four of us coming together, along with Dr. Allen. And I don't know if you have seen those podcasts with Dr. Allen so far, but you could go back and watch some of those. But all five of us will come together to do a group chat on a topic called From Brokenness to Wholeness. So welcome, Dr. Takara. How are you today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so looking forward to what we will be talking about. Yeah, but Dr. Takara is a remarkable force to be reckoned with. She is a prolific 12-time author and a 2-time Amazon best-selling author, affectionately known as the Identity Architect. She's a publisher, strategist, author, and visionary. Her guiding motto is life is choose in life is choose to live a life on purpose for purpose. I'll repeat that. Her guiding motto in life is choose to live a life on purpose for purpose. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the topic today is early signs. And in my book, Blink Twice, I offered 3 pieces of advice. The first one was to meet his or her parents before you decide to form this relationship. A second piece of advice was find out about their background. Get some information on their background. And then the third one was to look out for infidelity. And so over to you now, Dr. Takara. My question to you is, what are some of those early signs that you ignored?
Um, if God was trying to send me a sign, I missed every one of them. I think for me, I was 16 years old. My dad wasn't present in my life, didn't know what to look for in a man. My family thought it was just a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, didn't think anything of it. And so, some of the signs that started popping up, but I really didn't feed too much into it. He was very insecure about me hanging out with other people. Um,
How old was he, Dr. Takara, at the time?
I was 16, he was 19.
Mm.
So he was 3 years older than me. So He was very insecure about me hanging out with other people. Always had to know where I was. Um, if I didn't want to hang out with him, what was I doing instead of hanging out with him? um I didn't get it. I didn't see it. I thought, oh, he loves me so much, where he's checking in, or he just wants to make sure I'm around good company, or he just wants to know my whereabouts. Isn't that oh so sweet? Mm-mm. He was a narcissist. And I had no clue of that until after the fact. And so if I had to do this thing all over and relive that, I would definitely know the signs. So one of the signs is they want to be clingy. They want to know where you are all of the time. And that's because they're controlling. And they want to make sure that you're the only man or woman that you're seeing. And if you're hanging around other men and women, who are they? What do they do? Do they compare to them? It's a lot of insecurities in a man or a woman that is violent when it comes to domestic violence. And so, and watch the way that they talk to you. That was one of the things that I started to realize. It was that small talk, that belittling talk. And I just was like, oh, he's just having a bad day. Oh, that'll change, because they say sorry so many times to where you're like, okay, well, you know what? Especially as a Christian, you're like, I'm gonna give them grace. Okay, maybe, they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're just messed up. And so we really have to pay attention to these signs, and they are very real, and they never steer you in the wrong direction. And so when you were saying some of the things in reference to meeting the family, his family didn't like me because I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. And so they didn't approve of us dating at all whatsoever. I would come around and they'd be super negative or just rude. And so, yeah, you want to make sure that you're dating somebody that is welcomed by your family and vice versa. That's super important. I get that now. Now at the beautiful age of 42. And so, yeah, there's signs. We just have to be in a place of paying attention. And for some of us that have never experienced love, we may think that's love, and that they care so very much for us. No, they care more about themselves than they do us. And so we have to be mindful of that. And it's okay. Um, Pay attention to the signs so you can get out early.
Yes, indeed. This whole thing about narcissism, you know, um, a lot of people are so not understanding it. And I was in a forum recently where, a psychologist was saying that um, people like me and you can't diagnose narcissism because it has to be diagnosed by a qualified clinician who understands the signs and who can figure it out. And I'm like, are you for real? The point is that which narcissist is going to go and subject themselves to any kind of test to determine whether they're a narcissist, right? And
That's
so,
not,
yeah, go ahead.
no, that's not happening at all whatsoever. They gonna be
And
mad
so
at us even more if we talk about, oh, you're a narcissist. No, no.
this is the point. I mean, you don't want to walk around the place accusing everybody of being a narcissist, but certainly we need to understand what those signs look like, you know, and the point you made about, and sometimes you can see it with your friends, because I remember visiting this couple, and what I couldn't understand, it was just very remarkable for me, because the minute the man was in the room, right, she went quiet. There was not a sound that came out of her mouth. And the minute he went to the kitchen to do something, she was suddenly talkative, like, and I'm like, something isn't right with this picture, you know? And this is what happens. You have these people who everybody loves, and that's the other thing, that the Jekyll and Hyde. So the public face that everybody's saying, what a wonderful man. And one of the things that Dr. Allen used to say is that this thing, you have lawyers, you have doctors, you have bishops who are narcissists, you know, and these people are so lovable. Politicians, everybody loves them because there's, you know, they have these larger than life personalities, and, you know, they're lovable. And somehow, and this is why it's even more challenging for the spouses, for the children, for the family members, for them to explain why they're even trying to get away from this animal, you know. And so it really is a very tricky situation, and this is why it's important that we we provide the information that people you know, they need to know. And as you say, I mean, this is a 19-year-old, you know, it happens in any age, right? And maybe he was learning it from somebody,
He
but
was, yeah.
this is it.
He was learning it from his sister. His sister would trap him in a closet when their mom would go to work and would be really super mean to him and beat him up and stuff like that. And so a lot of times we think that someone who is an abuser, it comes from seeing parents that are abusive. And that's not always the case. And so that was his scenario. And he reached out to me a couple years ago and actually apologized again. And he's been apologizing for years. It's something that he hasn't been able.
Amazing. And
Yeah,
you know, that was one of the things I mentioned in my book as well. And I said, if that person has been abused, so you know, the point about look, you know, find out about their background. If that person has been abused, make sure they seek help, because they had, I mean, it's not their fault that they
right.
were abused, but certainly they need to seek help before forming relationships moving forward, because, you know, it's pointless having that kind of unhealed heart trying to love somebody else. You know, it really is ridiculous. So the whole matter of you know, for me, and it's so funny because I grew up in a family where only mad people go to psychiatrists and psychologists, you know, sane people like me and my family, we didn't need that kind of thing, you know. And so it wasn't until well into my later years that I started to recognize the importance of having psychiatric help, psychological help, counseling. You know, these kinds of people have been trained, they have seen signs, they understand these things, and they're able to help us. So, you know, that is one of my pieces of advice today, that if you have been abused, please seek help, because you don't want to be hurting other people, you know? Right. So Dr. Takara, my other question to you is, if you were going into a new relationship, and I happen to know that you are probably in a relationship right now, and I mean, how would you prevent a repeat? So, you know, have you done your due diligence? I mean, what do you do, and how do you handle this kind of thing now?
I called in my friends from the FBI to do a thorough inspection. No, I'm just kidding. Um, um, I I definitely took a different approach with this relationship for sure. Um, I was able to really take the time to understand who he was, kind of look at some of the family traits. I was able to meet his mom before she passed. His dad was already deceased. Being around his family, I definitely knew what type of person he was. Um, the things that people would say about him, that could speak to his character, I definitely understood. And to be very, very, very honest, now that I'm older, because I was 16, um, looking for love in all the wrong places because my dad wasn't around, being very honest, transparent, and got caught up. And but it arrested me in such a way where now I can speak on platforms and share with other people how to avoid those signs. And so I took a different approach with my relationship with my guy now. And the biggest thing was everyone kept saying the same thing about his character. And I said, oh, okay. And then I'm in a different place and space now where I was able to really see God and pray and ask for God to show me what was going on, what was I getting into. And he's been so faithful to guide me through different things. Now, none of us are perfect. We all have a past. We all have something that we all have to deal with, right? But he's definitely way, way, way far from being abusive. Never has been, never will be. But I still do have the trauma of the abuse that I went through. And so there's times where elevated voices really make me quiver inside and get me like super, super nervous. And so he's been so amazing that I'm like, we got to keep it at a certain level. If we do have an elevated conversation, because we don't really argue, we have elevated conversations where we may agree to disagree, which is perfectly fine. Um, but it has to stay at a certain level. If it goes above a certain level, I can feel my body becoming numb and very uncomfortable because of the trauma of being in a domestic violence relationship. So yeah, I've just done things differently. And I made sure this time that I didn't isolate people. When I was in that relationship, I isolated my family. And so with this one, I was very intentional about involving my family into my relationship just enough, not to where they knew all
Yes.
the tea. They could sip on the tea and figure out the flavor, right? And that's all they need to know. Because that's also really important when you're in a relationship,
Yes.
when your family don't need to know everything. Um, but being able to feel comfortable with letting them in, because I isolated my family when I was in that relationship. And I think
Mm,
a lot of it was because of what he was doing, and I was trying to protect him. And so I isolated my family because I think that things would have been different for him
yes.
if my family would have known what was going on.
Wow. Wow. Ah, I mean, it really is one of those situations that we have to make sure we get the messages out. We
For sure.
have to make sure we get the messages out, because even that whole thing about isolation from family members, it's not only that, it's friends as well. So what
Mhm.
sometimes they will do is that they'll say, I don't like that person, and I don't like that person. And, so it's all of these people that they don't like. And these are the same people who love you and who would want to protect you. And so by
Exactly.
by doing that, they make sure that they have their prey in a nice little cage, ready to pounce, you know,
Mhm.
ready to pounce. And so, we have to be aware of these kinds of things, because other than that, we're going to go back through the same old cycle. As I mentioned to you before we came on, I have a friend who recently came through a similar situation, and I got permission from her to speak, to just quote from what she said. She said, um, I was confused for many years, kept
Mhm.
thinking I was crazy. I was a crazy one because I couldn't explain a lot of stuff until God introduced me to the idea of narcissism, which she'd never heard of before. And as I learned more about it, suddenly my world became very clear. Suddenly, all the confusion cleared up. And I realized that I wasn't crazy. I could finally explain somehow what I was experiencing. And even so, to those who have never heard of narcissism, it still doesn't make sense, because they keep processing the information I am sharing through normal lenses. Because
Mhm.
of that, it makes no sense to them. And it's
Mhm.
unbelievable, to the
Mhm.
point where not even her ex-husband is fully aware of what he is doing. I mean, this is the part of it that is so distressing. But I'm happy that your abuser was able to come around to that point, you know,
Took
because
years, Jackie. It took him years. I mean, this was in the late 90s when this happened. It
yes,
took him years to come around. And what it was is that he saw me on social media, and he would ask how I'm doing and all that. And then he would go into just talking about how he still hasn't forgave himself for what happened. And he was doing that deep dive, kind of figuring out, why did I do this to this woman who was simply amazing, and now she, never wants anything to do with me, and absolutely not, and he knows that, so he had to do that deep dive and figure it out. But the other thing that we didn't talk about, we talked about it a little bit. I'm calling you Dr. Jack, Okay. The one thing that I didn't do when I got in this relationship was talk to my mom about
Mm.
what her relationship was like with my dad. And so my ex would come around, and she would just be like, "Ugh, there's just something about him. I don't like it." I would ignore it. I never thought to sit down with my mom and ask her. And you know what? I found out after the fact, my dad abused my mom. And my
Wow.
ex reminded her of my dad. Right.
Oh my goodness.
So the generational curse stopped with me.
Cycle of abuse. My God. That
And
is
so
crazy.
these moms out here, please don't be ashamed to talk to your
That's
daughters
it.
or dads. Don't be ashamed to talk to your
That's
sons
it.
about what you've went through, or someone in your family or something, because that thing is real. Generational cycles are very, very real.
My
And
goodness.
when my mom told me that, and the way she told me, Jackie, was we were in an argument, and my mom, this was back in the day, right? So, cell phones, we had them, but we didn't rely on them like we did. She picked up the home phone and heard me and his conversation. And she's like, "I'm ending this relationship. I knew I didn't like him because he reminds me of your daddy and the things that your daddy did to me." So imagine my
That's the
mom,
first time you're hearing that.
first time I'm hearing it, ending the relationship like that. And I'm like, "Why you never told me this? Why did
Wow.
you hide this from me?" So yeah, we have to be real and have those conversations with these kids.
Yes.
It's
My
important.
goodness. My goodness. I'm going to wrap up shortly, but I would love for you to just summarize, what are those things? If you met your 16-year-old self and you saw your 16-year-old self about to engage in this relationship, what would be that advice that you would give her?
Don't be secretive.
Mm.
Don't, if you have to sneak and be with someone, that's a problem all in
Mm.
itself. And so that's what I would have told my 16-year-old self now. Listen, love yourself enough to, if you want to be in a relationship, because at 16, are you really in a relationship, or you just learning about relationships, right? But anyways, um, don't, if you got to sneak to be with somebody, that's a whole problem. That's a whole problem. And there's more that's going to unravel if you continue to do it secretively. That's what I would
Wow.
tell myself.
Powerful advice. Powerful advice. And everything is wrapped into that, because anybody that loves you, your mother, your sister, your brother, will ask the right questions. You know what I mean? They will ask those right questions. They will do the investigation, sometimes on your behalf, and it is so important that that secrecy thing, almost any part of your life. And this is why I think the biggest joy I ever had was in coming out about my domestic. And like when the alcohol, when you go to AA, the first thing you have to say is, "I'm an alcoholic." The day I was able to publicly say, "I'm a domestic abuse survivor," it liberated me. It liberated me. That thing about secrecy, that's what the devil wants. He wants us to hide these things because he doesn't want the other people to know that, listen, it's wrong. There's another way, and there's freedom. That is what I believe God is saying. I want freedom for my people. I want my people to become all that I had originally intended. And if they're in an abusive relationship, it will never materialize. And so I am wanting to thank you again, Dr. Takara. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed every bit of this conversation, and I look forward to our group chat.
Yes.
And so to our audience, I would say like, subscribe, and share, and see you again next week. Beyond the silence, beyond the pain. Thank you, Dr. Takara.